Mm-hmm. Share my screen. I'm gonna stop video. All right. All right, y'all. So today we are going to be going more into like river civilizations. We're going to talk about Mesopotamia again, get more in depth in it, ideas that they created, stuff they created. This is something that's really, let me zoom in on this so you guys can see this better. This is has anybody heard of Hammurabi's or law code? Anybody ever heard of that? So this ancient king created this system of laws back in like I think it was 2300 BC, so a long time ago. So one of the first codes of law, and like this is like to set out different things. So it has property rights, it has death, it has thievery, it has marriage agreements, stuff like that. There's a bunch of different things in here that they created to try to get a sense of how to manage a city, empire, or community. So that's what they kind of. So I wanted to go through a few of these. We can kind of analyze them. Some of them are kind of funny. Yes, sir.
There's a question, but it's off topic.
That's.
Do you know, like, because they changed my schedule, so after one class, after lunch. I'll look it up.
Yeah, but all right. So we have this. So we have this law code we're going to go over. We're going to look over a few of them because they're kind of interesting. A few of them are kind of funny. Also, you might get a good laugh at a few of them. So, but we'll go over and we'll kind of see what the thinking was at the time, and I can give you some context of their religious thought for a few of these. So if we look at number 2, right? Can anybody read number 2 for me? Go ahead, sir.
If anyone bring an accusation against a man, and the accused go to the river and leap into the river.
All right, stop right there. So, isn't that weird that their judgment, the system of judging is based off of jumping into a river? Kind of like that might be a little weird, right? Oh, I'm just gonna go jump in a river. We'll see if I'm guilty or not. Okay, keep going.
If he sinks in the river, his accuser shall take the judgment of the house. But if the river proves that the accused is not guilty and he escapes unhurt, then he who had brought the accusation shall be put to death. While he who leaped into the river shall take the possession of the house that had belonged to his accused.
Huh? So basically, they have a religious belief that if you float, if you can swim, yeah, guess what? You're not guilty. And a lot of at this time period, which is weird because they lived by a river, a lot of them didn't know how to swim. A very slim few people knew how to swim, and so they had this idea that if you jumped into the river and sunk, you are now guilty, right? And if you swim, you're not guilty. So, what do you guys think the significance about this? If the accuser is wrong, they get put to death. Why do you think that is? By any chance? Okay. No, I'm talking about like somebody was like, oh, if I told you you did this.
What was that? Blackmail?
Okay, not blackmailing, but they're
Framing?
Yeah, framing or dishonoring that person. So to bring about so to counteract that, honor and your prestige in ancient times is like everything. So it means everything for you. So for this, what that does is like, well, if I was to say you stole all my cats. I had a bunch of cats. I want to go sell my cats, but you stole them all, and I accuse you. But you're like, okay, I want trial by river, and if you jump in and float, I guess I'm dead. So it keeps people from making false accusations also. So being put to death is almost a way to keep people from accusing people for things they didn't do. And it kind of keeps that down. All right. So let's go to 23. All right. Does somebody want to read number 23 for me? Somebody new. Can't read that? Anybody? Hunter, do you want to read that for me? Please.
If robber is not caught, then shall he who was robbed claim under the oath of not the flock. Then shall the community and on those whose ground territory and whose domain was compensate him for his goods stolen.
So what do you guys think about that? Do you want me to read that out loud for you? All right. So if the robber is not caught, then shall he who has robbed claimed under oath the amount of his loss. Then shall the community and of whose grounds and territories and whose domain it was compensated him for goods stolen. What do you guys think about that? What does that kind of sound like? Anybody want to break it down? What does that mean?
So if the robber gets away with it,
Mhm.
with oath, and then they get the stuff back.
Okay, you're on the right track. So with this one, if I was to go to Coach Vosberg's house and steal something, right? And they can't find the culprit. He can't find the stuff, anything. So what happens is it's up to the community, that group that he lives in, to compensate him for that. So it's almost like what do you think that does for a community? What does that incite?
Get them involved.
Okay, involved, yeah. So
Get mad.
you get mad. So now you have,
Right.
rights. Yes, you can see that. So it brings up unity, and it almost serves as a deterrent, because if the whole community suffers for something like that, well, now the whole community has to repay this man. So it's also a deterrent from further robberies. So it's an interesting way to look at it. You kind of look at these interesting laws that are different from what we think of. Because usually, if somebody steals your stuff but they never find them, what happens? There's nothing they can really do, right? I mean, they can keep an open investigation, but there's not much they can do. You don't really get compensated unless you have insurance. Makes sense? So this is almost like an ancient insurance. So you have an opportunity. If your stuff gets stolen, your community can help pitch in to help you out. It's almost like, yeah, it's like an ancient insurance.
They have to.
I'm not sure if they have to, but I think it's almost like an obligation. So it's not like you have to, but since it's something that's for the community, that I think it would be probably pitched in. You'll see with a few more of these, sometimes they have to give you certain things. Weird, right? All right. Eric, do you want to read number 32 for me? If you can read it that far.
What is that? Third word?
So if a chieftain, I'll just read them out since it's hard to read. If a chieftain or a man is captured on the way of the king, which is in war, and a merchant buys him free. So if I get if I'm a warrior, I get captured, and then a merchant can buy my freedom. All right. And brings him back to his place. If he has the means in his house to buy his freedom, he shall buy himself free. If he has nothing in his house which to buy himself free, he shall be bought free by the temple of his community. If there has been nothing in the temple with which could buy him free, the court shall buy his freedom. His fields, gardens, house shall not be given for the purchase of his freedom. Interesting, right? So if I was going to get captured, right? And let's say Thomas comes and saves me. He buys my freedom. So we get back to my place, and I'm like, yeah, I can't pay you. Sorry, thanks, but I can't pay you. So what that goes next to is to the priest or the temples. So if the temples can't pay you, they're like, well, we'll move it on to the so it's the temple of the community. So it's the community. So the community can't afford it. Then it goes on to the court system, which is the higher court, like King's Court and stuff like that. They'll buy your freedom because you were at war for the city state. And so they would buy their freedom. So you kind of see this progression of hierarchy, that like these steps that were taken for law. All right, 110.
Why do you think Hammurabi would enact these laws? Why would he take all this time to put all of these laws in? Peace.
Okay.
Okay. Let me ask you this: do you operate better if you know what a consequence of something is? Like there's a rule.
Yeah.
Okay. Think of playing basketball. What if you play the game of basketball, but there was no fouls, there was no goals, there was no winner, there was no loser, there was no time. That'd be as fun as actually playing a real game of basketball. Okay? If you say yes, your first thought is, well, there's no foul. Then all of a sudden somebody's gonna come in and hammer you. So then it's not gonna be as fun as what you thought it was. But rules and laws make things where you know that there's a set in stone of it. Okay? So it allowed people to have an answer as soon as something happened. The other problem, or the other solution for him, is he didn't have to listen to all of these people's problems anymore. They knew, hey, go find law 107. Okay, I got to be stoned in the river. Here we go. And it tells them exactly what's about to happen.
Exactly. So, I mean, yeah, it kind of it gave them a layout. It gave them a communal layout. It gave them an idea of what they could and can't do. It gave them their freedoms, their restrictions, stuff like that. So it kind of gave them like a roadmap to society. This is one of the first law sets and law codes created. Does anybody want to read 110 for me? It's kind of interesting. Kind of shows you a cultural difference. Go ahead, sir.
The sister of a god opens a tavern or enters a tavern to drink, then shall this woman be burned to death.
That's a little extreme, right? For opening a tavern or drinking, right? That seems a little extreme, but this person is what would be considered a priest or like a nun. Like a nun almost, yeah. A sister of the gods. So she is like a priestess or like a nun. And so it was frowned upon religiously for women of God. And I don't know exactly if it's also with, I need to go through this and read this again. It's been a long time. I'm not, if men also that were priests couldn't drink or open taverns, I'm not 100% sure. But does that kind of see like there's a different culture there, right? It's a lot different than you would think. Because nowadays we're like, that's ridiculous. You can go open a tavern if you want, or you can go drink if you want, and we're not going to burn you at the stake. That seems like a little Salem witch trial to me. So 116. I want to get to one more that's about 116 is pretty interesting. I'll just give you a base. It's about prison reform, stuff like that. There's a certain treatment you can give prisoners. 17 was anyone feel like me debt. Okay, so this one's interesting. It's for debt forgiveness. So 117. If anyone fails to meet claim for debt and sell himself, so you're allowed to sell yourself. It's completely legal. That's how you can get rid of your debt. All right, or you can sell your wife, which is crazy. You can sell your son and your daughter for money and give them to forced labor. So you can basically sell your family into slavery to pay for your debts. If all else fails and you're just like, you're just sitting there, you're like, nah, I want to pay my debt off, but I don't want to do it myself. You can just sell your family. It's completely legal.
Mom and dad better like you.
Yeah.
You start being bad.
Yeah. It's completely legal. So you kind of see these norms that we would associate as being, that's crazy, right? That's not something we would think of, but that's so normal back then because society was just developing. And so the idea of slavery was way more, not complex, but it was way more prevalent. It was happening all over the world. And so you kind of see that there's difference, like, because we look at that and like, oh, that's horrible, or we think it's kind of goofy. But at that day, that's completely normal. That was just a normal happenstance. Let me find.
I think that they were more apt to break the laws after these laws came out, because there was what kind of punishment?
Death.
Yeah, there was a pretty extreme punishment, right? So what do we hold? And you may have already said this while I was out of the room, but what do we do today that is similar to what Hammurabi's Code is? Okay, prison is one. What else? Can you still be sentenced to death?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And it's just adapted through time. Like whether it was in Texas, it's still legal on the books. It never happens, but it's still legal to hang a man for stealing cows.
Texas doesn't have a last meal request anymore.
Doesn't have what?
A last meal request.
Oh, the last number.
Yeah, 'cause it got abused.
Death row gas. Yep. So some of this stuff is still there. It's just adapted to our society. So then that way, there's still an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth, but it's a elongated process.
Yeah, it's been pushed through cultures, societies, and it's changed. Like these ideas are pretty basic in nature, but they become more complex as the world adapts, gets more intelligent, and personalized. So the last one I'm going to look at is 142. So this is this has to do with divorce, which is different because actually women in this society had a little bit more freedom than we think of for ancient society. So it's pretty interesting. If a woman quarrels with her husband and says, "You are not congenial to me," the reason for her prejudice must be presented. If 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 she is guiltless and there is no fault of her part, but he leaves and neglects her, then no guilt attached to the woman. She shall take her dowry and come back to her father's house. What is it? Does anybody know what dowry is?
Nope.
No? You guys never heard of what a dowry is? So have you ever heard of arranged marriages? You know how we talked about that a few last week? So what a dowry is, what would happen is a which in Mesopotamian society is a little bit different, but the general idea is a father will pay a family to take their daughter as like, and then that's like a payment. So it's like, we're not talking, and it's usually not in this time. It usually wasn't like gold or like silver or something like that. It was like, oh, I'll give you my you need to have my daughter, and I need you to give me a donkey. And yeah, it's very ridiculous in our times, but that's very normal. We look at this in our perspectives and our time period, and it seems so, like, it seems horrible. That's it, and I still think it's horrible. But we look back in that time, that's completely normal. That was the way they've done things. There's still societies today that still practice dowries. Not into the fashion like that. It's not as widespread, but it's something to think about when we're kind of going through this. So what this kind of shows you, and what's really interesting, is that there's difference in, this was, I don't know, 5,000 years ago, a little bit more. So this is, and then where we got now, you can kind of see there's a progression of what we consider normalities or just common courtesy or which culturally acceptable. We kind of see that that changes throughout the decades. It changes, it goes up hills, it goes down hills. Just a very weird and interesting route. So from that, we're going to go to our PowerPoint. So if everybody wants to take out their oh, still? Well, you can follow along.
You have to take your outside now?
You don't have to if you don't want to. It's just if you want to look at it. Yeah, that's fine. All right, so we're going to go over more river civilizations. Today, we're going to focus more on Mesopotamia, a little bit of Egypt, Indus River Valley. Does anybody know what the Indus River Valley is? It starts with an I. What other continent starts with a subcontinent? India. There you go. Perfect. All right. So we'll get into the different civilizations throughout the week. Today, we're mostly focusing on the city-states of Mesopotamia, which I talked about a little bit last week. So you guys have a little bit of background knowledge from that. So the Middle East is still in Asia. I don't know if you guys knew that from your geography class, but that's still considered Asia. It's Asia Minor area. It's still Asia. Just letting you guys know. So we talked about the Fertile Crescent last week, right? Can anybody tell me what we talked about last week about the Fertile Crescent? I know you guys probably slept since then, but anybody? It kind of has it in the name. Fertile Crescent.
A moon.
Okay, a moon. Oh, good. I mean, that's close. So the Fertile Crescent is this area between the Persian Gulf and Mediterranean. It's literally like if I was to pull up. You guys remember I told you guys about the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, those two rivers, right? And then also the Nile River. So it literally makes a crescent like this that connects them. The Nile River, that whole area is considered the Fertile Crescent, or that's where farming. So this includes Mesopotamia. It's, we went over this, fertile plain lands, rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, floods once a year, leaves rich soil. Yeah, we went over that last week. So environmental changes. So around 3300 BC, Sumerians began to farm southern Mesopotamia. So the area between the Tigris and Euphrates, probably the southern part of it more. So we talked about this last week with the religion. So their floods are unpredictable. They sometimes wouldn't get any rain, so they'd have droughts. they had land offers no barrier invasions, so they were kind of open because it was just flat land and a river. So they were very open to attacks. The land had very few natural resources, which can be a problem because if you don't have resources, you can't build a society. So we'll get into more like how they coped with that problem. Okay. So solving problems through organization. We talked about how writing helped to organize people, and more complex language helped to organize people to be able to make complex projects. They worked together to find solutions for a environmental challenge. Irrigation to control water. So do you think they, with unpredictable flooding and everything like that, they need canals, piping, and stuff to try to get water to these large fields? It would be something like that. They built walled cities. They didn't have wood or stone, unfortunately, so they would build mud walls. So you'd see these giant, they had these, like, you know, like when you take like mud pies, like that, but like hardened mud pies is like the best way to put it. They were still strong because they were made of clay, and so they were still pretty strong. It's almost like the same thing with, they'd be about the strength of like a brick house, kind of like that type of strength. What they didn't have, they had to trade for because of a surplus of food, right? So we talked about surplus of food opens up for international trade, and so they could trade further north in Anatolia, which is like modern day Turkey area, and in like Greece for wood and stone products. And we just talked about organization with the law code. So we have organization, leadership, and laws are starting to be developed in this area. Sumerian city-states. So does anybody know what a city-state is? Anybody give me an idea of what a city-state is?
Like a capital?
Okay, capital, good. All right, anything else? Anybody else can think of something? Can anybody think of a modern day city-state by any chance?
Washington, D.C.
Okay, getting close. Technically, Washington, D.C. could be seen as a city-state, but it's not really a city-state. The best way to put this, do you guys know what the city of Singapore is?
Yep.
Has ever heard of Singapore? It's in Southeast Asia, below China, basically. I could show you, but we don't really have that much time for that. So basically what a city-state is, you have one city and they control an area, right? So it's just like how we have Fort Worth City has a city line, right? It's just like that, but they are in themselves an own independent entity. They control themselves, they control the area. It's just one city and the area around it. So it's not like a country or like a state or anything like that. It's literally just a city and then the small area around it. That's what a city-state is, and that's what most of the leaders are in this area. Sorry, not leaders, but the city-state are all city-states in this larger Mesopotamian culture, if that makes sense. Each city is an independent public unit, so they each have their own king, they each have their own gods, they each have their own governmental systems. Sumer city-state is Uruk, Kish, Lagash, Umma, and Ur. Ur is one of the most popular ones. It's one of the most popular ones. We talked about it last week. Each city had a temple and a ziggurats. So it had a mass temple. We talked about those are gathering points, and also with ziggurats too. Priest rulers share control. So somebody, I forget who it was last week, said this was kind of like a theocracy. You have a control through religion and through a ruler, like a dynasty or like a single family. So Sumer's early government controlled by temple priest. So it started as priest controlling the communities, and then eventually through military leadership and stuff like that, it became dynasties. So you'd have these single family ruling classes. The spread of cities by 2500 BC. Does anybody know what BC means exactly?
Before Christ.
Okay, the scientific one for history. So what it is, it's called, so we can get rid of the confusion because it'll get more because it'll be BCE. So BC means before Common Era, if that makes sense. And then AD is after, I forget what it's BCE. It's ACE, which is after Common Era. So if we get into like terms like later on, and it'd be like 2500 ACE, that's after Common Era. just so you guys know. All right, so 2500 BC, many new cities are fertile and fertile crescent. So if you have a large, like we talked about, if you have a lot of search for food, what do you get? Large population centers, which create villages, which can turn into towns, which create cities. So there's like this whole roadmap for civilizations that's being constructed. Cultural diffusion. Does anybody know what diffusion means? Anybody like give an idea what diffusion means? So diffusion is like, so everybody, so let's just say Stephenville has never had Mexican food. Like it's never had Mexican food. I know it has it, but give it an example. So it's never had Mexican food, right? But all of a sudden there's one Mexican restaurant that sets up, right? And then now everybody loves it. So it starts spreading. That's what diffusion is. So you start with one idea and it spreads throughout the culture. That makes sense. And it becomes like a part of the culture through diffusion. And also other cultures can diffuse and it becomes a melting pot almost. All right, a religion of many gods. Can anybody tell me what polytheism is? What does it mean? What does poly mean? Multiple, good. So if they have a polytheistic religion, what does that mean they have? Multiple gods and goddesses, yes. So if I would say that they're a monotheism, what does that mean?
One.
So it's one. So they have one god or one deity or one spiritual leader, something like that. So that's the way it kind of. So this society was based on polytheism. So they have multiple gods. They have a large pantheon almost, like we look at like the Greeks or the Romans. They have a large group of gods. Like I said last week, each city has their own patron god, which is like their deity for that city. So their gods act more like humans, kind of like they're more human-like, they're more humanistic, but they're not equal. They're still servants. The people are still servants for the gods. So and then their life after death for them is just kind of bleak and gloomy. So it's not really it's not rainbows and sunshine, or they get to go to like some paradise. It's kind of bleak, and it's kind of like purgatory almost, is the best way to put it for those of you that are Catholic. Life in Sumerian society. Sumerians have a social class. So we talked about the once civilization started getting away, they developed through surplus of goods, through allocation of wealth. We get these societies that spring up. So we get the king, which is over the head, and then you have landowners, which landowners have a lot of power because they have access to farming land, resources, and everything like that. Priests at the top also. So priests get a special privilege because they are the holy people of the society. So they get donations. They have a higher class. There's also right below them would be wealthy merchants. So if you start selling goods and develop money, you are considered a merchant. And then right after merchants, it doesn't say, it'd be like common folk, would be your middle of the ground, and then your lowest level is slaves, which in most societies was like that. Women have rights to become priests, merchants, and artisans. So in this society, they had rights to own businesses, create crafts, get involved in their religious ceremonies, and also sell. And so they had a little bit more rights than we would think for ancient people. So it's really nice. Sumerian science and technology. Believe it or not, they invented wheels. Something as simple as a round thing was pretty revolutionary back in the day. Because what do you think a wheel allows you to do? Transport, travel. You think it's a lot easier to transport things with a wheel? Exactly. What about sails? Sails are pretty important. It allows you to go up and down rivers when pretty much all of these river civilizations were on rivers. So sails are pretty important. Do you think a plow is kind of important? What do you do with the plow? You break up dirt to do what? Exactly. So they invented the plow. So it made it easier to plant seeds. Instead of just throwing them everywhere, you now could plow a field and throw seeds down, and it'd be more efficient and get more profit out of it. They had arithmetic and geometry, so they developed their own math systems. They developed math, so like 1 + 1, 2 + 2, stuff like that, and geometry, so they could make buildings, have angles and stuff like that. Arches, columns, ramps, pyramids for building. The pyramids were their ziggurats. Those were their pyramids. They had a complex, we already talked about this system of writing, the cuneiform, and they studied astronomy, chemistry, and medicine. Why do you think medicine's important? Heal people? Yeah, from what? War, disease, exactly. Good. What about astronomy? What does astronomy do for them? What can you get from astronomy by any chance? Does anybody know what? Yeah, looking at stars, stargazing. Directions, good. What else? Planets, yeah. Prophecies. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Prophecies, religious beliefs, stuff like that can come from astronomy. They could also predict different things like solar eclipses, comets, stuff of that nature. Time of war. So do you think if you have a bunch of city-states that are independent, do you think it's going to be peaceful or kind of hectic? Pretty hectic, right? So you just have a bunch of people in different groups doing their own things with their own government, but they're trying to push their own influence and will upon other city-states to get the most power. A very human thing to do. Sargon of Akkadian, I think that's how I believe that's it, defeats city-states of Sumer. Sumer's also a very big, popular city-state for this era. Creates the first empire. So this is the first empire we see. So we see a person that's in control of multiple independent states, or city-states in this case. So we see that first actual event of like an actual empire, which is kind of interesting. This was about 2,300 years ago. I mean, well, actually longer than that, 4,300 years ago, sorry. So it's very interesting that this long, and it lasted 200 years. So one of the first empires lasted for 200 years, which is pretty long for an ancient empire. They have a trend of not lasting longer than like 50 years, some of them, which we'll get into that. There's you guys probably know the Babylonians. Have anybody have not heard about the Babylonians or Tower of Babylon, stuff like that? For some of you, it might be an idea, but this is where we get the Hammurabi's rules. He was the king or emperor or ruler of Babylon. Amorite nomadic warriors controlled the region for 2,000 years, making Babylon on the Euphrates River the capital. It was kind of the unofficial capital of Mesopotamia, and it created the Babylonian Empire, and it peaked between 1792 and 1750. So only 40 years. This empire lasted 40 years. It would fluctuate. This is like one of its uprises and downfalls. It fluctuates. Empires fluctuate up and down constantly. The Hammurabi's Code. So we've gone over this. It created a code of laws for the Babylonian Empire. It was 282 laws. That's a lot of laws back then, right? When pretty much everything was kind of dog eat dog. This is a lot of laws to be able to set up, as it says, different punishments depending on social class and gender. Goals for government to take responsibility for order, justice. Almoite rules for Fertile Crescent ends in 200 years after Hammurabi. So his ideas would go on for another 200 years. And that's pretty much it on that one. How much time do we have left?
58. So about 9, 11, something like that. 11 minutes.
If you guys want to go ahead, you can start on your quiz. You have plenty of time. Here, I'm making it live right now. Chapter 2, Section 1. You got to make sure you're paying attention. So we got to make sure you're paying attention.